guys, and welcome back to my channel. So I'm already back with my next book review, so if you guys like these kind of videos and want me to continue doing them, definitely make sure to leave a like and a comment, subscribe if you're new, if you want me to continue doing these kind of videos, because I do think it's fun. It's a nice kind of quick way to get all my ideas down about the books that I read in a video format. So without further ado, of course, I'm going to be talking about The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, which I mentioned in my last book review video. And as I said in that video, this book is definitely one where it seemed like to me from the brief look that I saw the reviews for it, you either fall into the camp where you really enjoy this book or you really hate this book. So I'm definitely very, very happy to say that I definitely really enjoyed reading this book. It was a lot of fun, and the fact that this is the book that definitely brought me out of a very long reading slump, because I finished this in just a matter of days, and I had done that with the book in like a year, so that's definitely a good sign to me, and I definitely cannot wait to get the second book in this series, which is The Wicked King, and see where things go. But with that said, let me go ahead and tell you guys about, little synopsis that they give you here on the back of the book about what is this book even about. So it says, sharpen your blade, harden your heart, which is definitely very accurate. Jude was 7 when her parents were murdered, and she and her 2 sisters were stolen away to live in the treacherous high court of Fairy. 10 years later, Jude wants nothing more than to belong there, but many of the Fae despise humans, especially Prince Carden, the youngest and wickedest son of the High King. To win a place at court, Jude must defy him and face the consequences. So yes, that is the little snippet that they give you on the back of this book, and much like the fairy in this book, they can't lie, but they don't exactly tell the whole truth when they speak, and that is how I feel about this sort of synopsis on the back of this book, because there is definitely way more happening than what they're letting on, and of course they're kind of, so that definitely brings me to one of my first points about this book, is that in a lot of ways it was not what I was expecting, but in a very good way. So to explain, as I mentioned in my last video, I've discovered this book thanks to fan art on Pinterest, and when I saw how people, these various artists were depicting the two main characters, Jude and Carden, hopefully I may be pronouncing the name wrong, I don't know, but I'm just doing the best I can with that. So, yeah, so a lot of the fan art showed them, it reminded me a lot of A Court of Thorn and Roses, especially with how that book describes Freya and Rhys. So I went into this book kind of expecting something similar to that, and while of course both book series take place in a fairy kind of realm, they are not very comparable. And even I would say the relationship between Jude and Carden, and then comparing that to Frey and Rhys, is nothing alike. Not really. So that was definitely a nice surprise. And sort of speaking on the differences between those two books, if you were to compare those two, this one and A Court of Thorn and Roses. A Court of Thorn and Roses, from what I remember, it's the whole entire thing is kind of set in what feels like a more just kind of separate fantasy world, even though there are humans. While this book, and this isn't really much of a spoiler because you literally learn, this just reading the first few pages of the prologue, while it is set in sort of this fairy world, our kind of idea of the normal mortal realm is just beside that. So I mean, there's malls and cars and all that kind of stuff. So that is important because it's part of what is the challenge, part of the challenge for Jude and sort of her sisters is having that mortal realm right there, because of, as it says in the back cover here, their parents are murdered. I don't know if I'll leave that maybe to the spoiler section of this video of how that maybe went down, because again, I don't feel like that's too much of a spoiler because you literally learn that reading the first chapter. But yes, so speaking of Pinterest, since I finished this book, I've been able to enjoy all the various memes and even more fan art from this book, and now I can look at it and be like, I understand what that reference is. But one sort of like snippet from Tumblr or something that somebody did was a really good description of how it feels to read this book, and that is, it goes 0 to 100 real fast. So to explain that, what I mean by that, without giving too much away, so the book itself is separated into 2 parts, or 2 books. And I would say for most of book 1, you're in the situation where you're expecting, you think it's kind of like, oh, it's a girl who gets picked on at school a lot, just to give you kind of a vague idea of what's going on. And then it doesn't. It's not that at all, because it quickly turns into something completely different, and it's just, by the end of the book, there's a hell of a twist at the end that you're just like, wow. Jude is a very interesting character. Of course, she's the main character of this book, and her development throughout it is very good, I think. I enjoyed it. I like her personality. It's funny. So yes, overall, I rated this, of course, if you haven't figured it out already, I rated this 5 stars on my Goodreads, which is obviously the highest rating that I could give it, because I really liked it. Yeah, I definitely can't wait for the next book. There's only one thing that I found kind of odd, and that is in relations to the prologue chapter, is that the prologue, and I understand why it's done this way, but the prologue is completely written from 3rd person, while the rest of the book is told from 1st person, from Jude's perspective. Again, I understand why she made that choice to do that, but it's just kind of odd when you first read it, because it's kind of confusing to know like who the main character is at first, but I mean, it becomes obvious once you read more into it. So with that said, I think I'm going to get into a little bit more spoiler heavy things, so if you do not want to be spoiled at all for anything in this book, please do check the description and see what timestamp I leave there, so that you can sort of skip to the end to hear my final sort of wrap up, and then see what I'm going to be reading next, if you're interested in that at all. So without further ado, let me go ahead and get into the spoiler section. Alright, so if you've stuck around for this long, you've read some of this book already, or you don't care to be spoiled at all. Again, I'll try not to have it be like too bad of a spoiler. I won't spoil the ending per se, but some of the other things I will spoil here. So first thing I want to talk about is definitely the relationships in this book, both non-romantic and then kind of romantic, because that's definitely, I think, maybe a point where some people maybe when they went into this book they were expecting something very different, and it might be on the romance side of things, because I think with most YA books you're expecting sort of a more obvious romance element going on. I might be wrong in thinking that, and that's part of the reason why I like this book, because the romance element wasn't super heavy, and it also was done in a way that wasn't super typical. So, I mean, a large part of that has to do with how Jude sort of interacts in those situations. So, on the non-romantic side of the relationships, definitely one of the big important ones is between Jude and Maddox, I believe is how you say his name, and that is sort of her stepfather. It's so, again, I feel like maybe this isn't too much of a spoiler, because it's literally the first thing you're going to read. He's the one who kills her parents, because her mother, who is human, was his wife, and she left him and took his firstborn daughter, which is Vivi, who is of course one of the 3 sisters. It's Jude, it's Tarwin, they're both the 2 twin human sisters, and then there's Vivi, who is Fae, obviously. So that is the whole reason why he comes to the human world. He finds out where they are, he kills the parents, and then he's going to take back his firstborn, and he doesn't leave Jude and Tarwin there because of like honor reasons, that it is his human wife's kids, so he doesn't want to leave them and abandon them. So he takes Jude and Tarwin to the Fae world and raises them as his own and as Fae children. So that's also part of the reason why Jude and Tarwyn are picked on the way that they are. So that whole relationship is really interesting because Jude doesn't exactly hate him. I don't know if maybe some people would say it's kind of like a Stockholm syndrome kind of thing, but he's the one who raised Jude. And they're very almost alike in a lot of ways, but not exactly. So that whole relationship is interesting. Speaking of Jude's twin sister, Tarwyn, towards the middle of this book, pretty much throughout most of it, I could not stand her. I don't know how to explain it. It's not that she doesn't necessarily have a backbone, but yeah, kind of like that. She definitely doesn't have the same kind of backbone that Jude is. She's nothing like how Jude is, so I found her annoying, just to be quite honest. She was just kind of annoying. So yeah, like, Jude and Tarwyn are even though they're twins, they are both very, very different in this situation, because Tarwyn, she just wants to keep her head down low and, get married and sort of fit in like that kind of box, while Jude, her main goal, we learn, is like she wants to be a knight. She wants to earn her spot at court. She wants to get there by her own means, like by her own power in a way, because of the whole dynamic that, they're mortal, so they don't have the kind of power that the Fae do. So that's like kind of a lot of Jude's driving force. And on that note, let me get to some of the romantic relationships in this book, because there really isn't much in that way happening in this book to be, how do I say this? So Jude, like, one of the first romance sort of interests kind of thing that we have going on here is with Loki. I think it's how you say his name. And, he's part of Cardan's sort of gang of evil pick-on kind of people. But he acts kind of different from them in that he takes an interest in Jude and sort of flirts with her, invites her to her parties, and so Jude kind of goes along with it. But even she, like, there's a moment in the book where she's just like, kind of flat out says to him, like, oh, this is kind of just make-believe. Like, she doesn't exactly believe that it's happening, and it's almost like a distraction to her. She's not completely in it. It's like, it's very unclear really what her feelings are. She doesn't, or maybe it's not that unclear. It seems to me, at least, that she really doesn't have much feeling for Loki. I keep wanting to say Loki, because that's definitely how his personality is. He's kind of like that charming, smooth talker, and they describe him as a fox, like fox kind of like features and whatnot. And so that was that's kind of one of the main love interests we see, but really, he does some really messed up stuff towards the end of the book. I'm not going to say and spoil that much, but needless to say, he's not really in the picture here. Really, the one in the picture here is Cardan, of course, the main sort of tormentor for Jude and her sister. But of course, my whole thing when I was reading because obviously from the fan art, I knew that there was some sort of thing that's going to happen between these two characters, or else, that's what even got me to start reading this book to begin with. So, because I knew it was one of those kind of relationships where it's like they hate each other, but they secretly love each other kind of thing. And I'm still not thinking that's wrong, but there's definitely more layers to that than that kind of basic idea. So yeah, for most of it, with the interaction, especially for like the book 1 section of the story, it's like, oh, Cardan's just like a giant 5-year-old with a giant crush on the school playground who wants to pull his crush's pigtails kind of thing, So, but again, later on in the book, we really get a good look at what he's thinking in his mind in a very badass scene between him and Jude. I'm not gonna, I really want to spoil it, but I'm not going to, because it's one of the, my favorite scenes in this book, and I think everybody else who's read this book and likes it would agree that it's one of the, just, you read it and you're just like, the balls on Jude, it's just like, wow. But yes, it's like, obviously, Cardan is more of the main her main love interest, but they're both clearly interested in each other, but there's a lot of things sort of above that keeps them from really admitting anything to each other, at least not in a very romantic kind of way. Maybe that's the way I'll put it. But also, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to read the second book because of what Jude does to Cardan at the end of the book is setting up. I'm very curious to see how their dynamic plays out in the second book and sort of what Cardan does to her, what she does to him, because it's a very interesting situation. But yes, Cardan is definitely a complicated character in this book. They're both very complicated. And while they act like they're very different from each other, again, this is another group of characters that I feel they have a lot more similarities going on than I think either one of them really realizes, or maybe in small ways they kind of do because of the scene that you who have read the book know what I'm talking about. They kind of admit in a very indirect way what's happening. So yes, like Jude's character, that's definitely my number one favorite thing about this book, is how her character development goes from sort of feeling like she's trapped in this situation where she really badly wants to be a knight, she wants to gain her own power, and then here comes a situation where she is presented with power, but it's not the power that she was anticipating for herself, especially being raised by Madoc, who's very honor driven, a knight, all that kind of thing. And so the situation that Jude is presented with is not a situation where it is about kind of like that honor, but in that moment she admits herself to wanting the power more than necessarily liking what the means are to it. So, and that's, a lot of her character kind of stems from that, is that and I feel like that is what's hinted through a lot of the situations, and it's kind of thrown up into her face, is that a part of her deep down wishes that she was Fae, so that she could be like them and just kind of get things in the same way that they do. And by that I mean like the power that they gain and their positions and stuff like that. But also I think that's definitely a large part, I think, how she feels in sort of the book 1 section of this. But then by, I think, the end of this book, and by part 2, she kind of switches that idea, where I think she comes to accept more of her human and the power that she has as the human, because she's underestimated at every turn. And because she's underestimated, that gives her more power in the situation, you know what I mean? So I love that. And again, as I already said, like, it's kind of a crude way to put it, I don't know, but there's like the balls that she has towards the end of the book is like gnarly, because it's just Jesus. Some of the stuff she does, I'm telling you, like, even if at the end you don't necessarily like this book, I think just reading and just focusing on her as a character is interesting enough. I would, even though I always hate when I think about this because it's never done right, but if this were to be turned into like a TV show or a movie, it would make a very good movie, or like a TV, because of the amount of like drama and treachery, backstabbing, all that stuff would make for a very entertaining film. But with that said, when do they ever make a good book to movie adaptation? Or in some cases, at least maybe, book to TV show adaptations they have a better, track record, but movie ones, I mean, Harry Potter and like Lord of the Rings, those are pretty, decent, but there's, for those who have read the books, for those, they're still not exact. So anyway, with that said, I think that's most of the spoiler things I want to talk about. Overall, again, I just loved all the dynamics in this book, and again, because it is so like drama and just backstabbing and trickery and all that, it made for a very fun read because of that. Especially coming off of the back of reading like A Discovery of Witches, while it has drama in it, it's not sort of maybe high stress. Maybe that's the word I want. It's not as high stress as this, where it's like every second of this book you're kind of wondering what's going to happen, because you're put in that situation where it's like Jude is human and she's surrounded by fairies, and the fairies have all this power and stuff, and so it's kind of, you know, like prey versus predator, prey becoming predator, you know, that, if that makes any sense at all. But that's kind of what I'm thinking of, like how this book is, and there's a lot of twists to this, so I'm very, again, I've probably said it like 3 times by now, very curious to read the next book. I gotta get it, and I need to read it. I know it came out not too long ago, actually, so I think it came out in January, so I might be getting a hardcover one if it's not on paperback yet. But anyway, so yes, that is my long-winded review of The Cruel Prince. So I definitely highly recommend you try reading this book, especially I think if you've read Court of Thorn and Roses, you might like this book. It's not like Court of Thorn and Roses, but there's enough of that flavor that I think somebody who's read that book would probably find something enjoyable in this book. So yes, 5 stars, definitely recommend reading, put it on your summer TBR. And with that said, let me give you guys a little preview of what I am reading currently and what I've started reading next, and that is Tempest Rising. So I haven't read much of this already, and what does it say on the back here? The land is her comfort, yet it can't satisfy her. The ocean is dark and dangerous, yet it beckons her home. Her heart is torn in two, yet it pulses stronger than ever. Better take cover, a tempest is brewing. So if you haven't figured out from that, this is obviously like a mermaid book. And I definitely wanted to read this one next because I have another idea for a different video that I want to do this summer, and it definitely requires that I need to finish reading this book in order to do that video. But yes, again, I haven't read much of this book. I haven't really got into it yet, but already I'm not sure if it's gonna get the same rating as this book, to be quite honest. Hopefully it does something interesting, you know? Right now it's kind of, I don't know, it's very like, I hate saying that, but it is kind of like the atypical way of starting kind of like one of these kind of stories with the mermaids. But I have high hopes. I'm not gonna pass too much judgment yet. We'll see what happens. You guys will get my review of it if you want to hear it. So again, if you do want to see me do that video of reviewing The Tempest Rising when I finish it, please do make sure to like and comment on this video, subscribe if you haven't already. Also, all my various other links will be down in the description, so if you want to check out my Instagram or any of my shop stuff like Redbubble or shop, what else do I have down there? Oh, all my other various social medias. So yes, thank you all so much for watching. Again, I will see you in the next one. Have a great day, guys.